morning, everyone. Welcome to Wool and Spinning. My name is Rachel. This is episode 259. It's crazy. We are at a very high number. We've been doing this for a long time. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Wool and Spinning. I hope that you find something here that you enjoy, that you like, that you want to check out. I really appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you watching and liking and subscribing and all the things. It makes a big, big difference. We hit a huge milestone this past week. We hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. So thank you, thank you, thank you. From the bottom of my toes, because my heart isn't deep enough. I just want to say an extra special thank you to those who hit that subscribe button over the last couple of weeks. Thank you so much for pushing us up just that little bit. It makes a huge difference in terms of how you're seen on YouTube, and YouTube recommending your videos to other people, and just finding other people that are into talking about hand-spun yarn. That's the goal. That's what we want. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to those who are the early adopters who pressed subscribe like 6-7 years ago. Thank you for still being here. I really appreciate it. So lots of gratitude this morning. Thanks, you guys. Today's show is it ended up being a lot bigger than I thought that it was, and I was actually scrambling a little bit a couple minutes before I started the stream, right up until I pressed start streaming, because I had so much to share with you guys, and I realized that I hadn't put in a couple of the photos that I wanted to put in, and then it wouldn't download, and then it wouldn't come out. Anyways, it was a bit of a, so there's a couple of things that unfortunately I was hoping to show you, but they just would not upload. So we'll save it for next time. It'll be something to look forward to. It's actually been longer, Eve. She says 7 years. Have I known you that long? I get based on how old Nora is. So I started streaming when Nora was about in the June of 2014, and Nora was born in March of 2014. And I met my dear friend who's here today, Diana Twiss, who taught me how to ply, because I knew how to spin singles. I didn't know how to ply, and got me going on my spinning wheel again in the sort of May, June of that year, and I kind of just never looked back. So I turned on the camera and I started uploading videos to Vimeo in 2014 in June. So we are coming up on 9 years. So crazy. So very cool, very crazy. So we have had a very dreary January, typical, lots of rain, lots of gray. Me and James are experiencing just an unbelievable amount of eczema. I'm trying really hard not to scratch my face, and we are this whole side of my face and all down into my nose and everything is all inflamed with eczema. I'm surprised you can't see it on the camera. It's probably just not that high def. If it was 5K, you guys would probably see it, or 4K. Anyhow, it's been a little bit of and James's is acting up really badly too. So it's kind of that time of year. And Rebecca said to me yesterday, she's like, I'm feeling very January. We're all feeling very January. And I never heard that before, but that is exactly how I feel. I feel very, so this is nice to look forward to. It's an up. In today's show, I wanted to just do a little tiny bit of housekeeping. It won't be long, just making a couple of announcements about the Year of Color, and then we've got some projects to talk about, which are quite significant. My fin is going gangbusters, and my hand spun weaving I wanted to talk about on the show because it is hand spun, so it needs to be here, not in a separate show on Welford Weaves. So like I said, last live stream, I might take those kind of bits out of the show and make it into a Welford Weaves episode later. We'll see how that goes. Just more for like chronicling than anything, trying to journal things and keep it straight and keep it kind of in its many silos, if you will. I do have one announcement that goes with our Year of Color announcement, so we'll start there. Our Year of Color has officially kicked off. We kicked off on Boxing Day, December 26th. With the first part of a 2-part interview on the Wool Circle with Rebecca and Katrina. Katrina is the dyer in-house founder creator of Crafty Jack's Boutique. She was our dyer in residence for years for the Breed and Color study. She's taken a step back from that because of just the workload. It's very, very heavy. It's a big undertaking to do Breed and Color study. So we decided to take a break and to step back so that it would free her up to do other things, as well as freeing me up to do other things, which is a really good fit. So her and Katrina sat down, Rebecca and Katrina sat down on the first episode of the Wool Circle. It is linked in the show notes, and later I will put the links down below once this is released. And that is just to go through, like, basically it was just kind of an intro to our year of color. The second part was then streamed with the Wool Circle the next week. And now we are like off and on our way. Like we are like flying. The amount of stuff that is coming out of the community for our year of color already in just a very short period of time has been unbelievable. The call that I put out to the community back in December for, I gave them an assignment, has been unbelievable. So to that end, Spinning Pearls is part of the paid Patreon content that you get when you join Patreon. And when you join Wool and Spinning and when you join the community, everybody from the Spinning Circle up has access, or I think it's the Coffee Circle. From the Coffee Circle up has access to Spinning Pearls, which is the monthly teaching content. So that has been released for the first part for the month. There was so much this month for the community participation part and the call that I had put out to the community for all of the sampling and playing and like, this is what we're studying, go, like show me what you guys can do. It was incredible what came back. So I did my own experimentation and my own sort of with my own observations, and then I also have a whole segment of the second part of the vlog. This community participation, and if I had released it as one big vlog, it would have been almost an hour. So I broke it into two, and the second part will be streaming next week at 10 a.m. Pacific on Tuesday, same time as the podcast right now. So this time next week. For everyone. So it'll be a premiere, it'll be public, and everybody will be able to watch. And you guys will be able to see what amazing things are created from within this community. And hopefully that'll give you a little bit of a sort of an inside peek into what goes on. So that will be going on next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, and that is for everybody. And so I hope you guys can make it. If it's received well and if it's really positive, then we'll do it again in February, and then just gives you guys sort of an insight into what happens behind the scenes for those that are part of the Patreon community of Wool and Spinning, which is really cool. So our year of color is off and on its way, and I'll show you guys. I just want to make sure that I caught everything, that I said everything that I needed to say. So Rebecca is interviewing Katrina on the Wool Circle, and the most recent episode of the Wool Circle, I should mention actually, is that Rebecca introduced color wheels. So for people who are learning how to use color wheels and you don't know how to use a color wheel, the most recent episode, it was episode 85 of the Wool Circle. Rebecca goes through all of that with you, and then she translates it onto fiber and starts to break down her braids and tries to figure out where on the color wheel those braids are and what they are, which is really cool. So part 2 for Spinning Pearls this month, which is the content that I create for our patrons, will be coming out next Tuesday. So I hope you guys will join us. Very exciting. It's all very exciting. Stuff to look forward to. So thank you once again for the 10,000 subscribers. That just makes all the difference, like I said. And I had a mystery mail this week, a mystery mailer. Something showed up in our mailbox, and if you know who you are, please consider coming forward so that I can thank you properly. But I will share that with you guys after the intro credits, because I wanted to share with you an extension that came out of sort of spindle spinning and support spindling and this project that I had that I wanted to get finished last year, 2022, that did get finished and moved on to another project. And so the mystery mailer, if you know who you are and you know what I'm going to be sharing, please consider coming forward so that I can say thank you. But if you would prefer to stay anonymous, which I totally understand, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I will share with you what it is after the intro. Okay, so last year, for 2022, I had a plan and a project that I really wanted to get through. And I wanted to support Spindle Spin through a bag of fiber that I had had in my stash for quite a long time. And I had approached it and tackled it in like when I had first bought it, and it was really, really difficult, and it ended up being really, really hard to tackle. And the reason was because it was Cormo, and it was very, very, let me see if I can find photos. So it was very, there was a lot of lanolin in it. Every time I tried to wash it and get it clean, it would, I could not get it clean. And I, of course, the little samples that I would do, I would wash it in really, really super hot water, and I would get it all clean, and it would be clean, but it would also be quite, not felted, but badly fulled. I tried the temperature, I tried everything. Anyhow, that was quite a while ago. I was still not super confident about washing fleece and not super confident about doing that much fleece. It was about a pound, just over a pound of Cormo, straight off the sheep's back. It had been skirted, but that was kind of it. It was incredibly clean because it was a hand spinner's fleece. And so finally, my friend Liz of Kingdom Fleece and Fiber Works reached out to me and said, I could probably get it clean for you, and I could probably put it through my pin drafter. And I was a bit concerned because it is so incredibly fine, and it did come through the pin drafter with a little bit of neps in places and a little bit of texture, but I didn't care because it was clean and it was spinnable. And I figured I'm just going to spin a slightly textured yarn and let's see what happens. And this is the perfect fiber because it's a little bit sticky, not in terms of like lanolin being left in it, but in terms of draftability. It's so fine and it's so crimpy that it wants to stick to itself. It wants to pull itself along. So I thought, what a great fiber in a woolen prep to learn how to spin on support spindles. And so what I did was I started spinning on my support spindles, and I started amassing spindles. And my friend Diana had sort of done this the year before during COVID. And so and during the pandemic and when we were all at home. So I sort of took a page out of her book, and I was like, there's really not a whole lot of reason not to make this a priority. And when I'm out and I'm waiting at the kids' soccer games, when I can sit and I'm not walking, when I am at tutoring and I'm waiting for them, I can sit and spindle spin. So that's what I did. And by the end of, sort of by about halfway through the year, I had amassed a pretty fair selection of support spindles. Two of the spindles that I bought back in the summer were by Alan Berry. So one of them is photographed here on the very far side, and he did this beautiful carving for me with mushrooms. And it's just mushrooms all the way around. I love different toadstools, different mushrooms. I think they are absolutely beautiful with all of their amazing color. I make sure that I eat a few mushrooms every single day because of the health benefits. They are incredible for you. They have anti-cancer properties. Don't eat them raw though. You want to steam them ever so slightly. You don't want to eat raw mushrooms. So after he had made the first one, which I just showed you, I asked him if I could possibly have a second one as part of the same order. And he said, absolutely. And I said, could you do something along the same lines so that they are obviously matching? And he did, but he tucked this little guy in there, this little mouse. And I proceeded to receive these two spindles, and I filled them up with Cormo again and again and again, and I just loved them. And in the end, I spindle spun all of that Cormo, and I actually have a total for you, and I totally forgot to write it down. I put all of my Cormo through my yardage counter, which is just a fishing counter for a fishing line. And I figured out exactly how much yardage I had. So I have 2,050 yards from a total of 285 grams of fiber in the end. I'm just going to move things around. I have, my screens are all backwards, and I don't like that. I like to see the chat right there, and I had it all backwards. So I knew that I wanted to do something with this fiber that sort of, it was very, very finely spun, and I wanted to do something with it right away and not just put it in my stash and not work with it, because I wanted two things. One, I wanted to be able to say that I had worked with the fiber from the fleece all the way through till the end. And secondly, I wanted to I wanted the experience of spindle spinning all of this yarn, and I did cheat and I plied it on my Ashford e-spinner, which is right behind here, which is, for big spins like this, I do love it for plying. It just, you can get through it so much quicker. It is a 2-ply in the end. And I wanted to be able to work with it right away, to be able to sort of reflect on what my spindle spun yarn could do. And it was too fine to knit with. Like, I would be knitting, if I did a sweater out of this yarn, like I would have to knit on like 2.5 or 2.75 millimeter needles, maybe 3 millimeters, but even then that's getting a bit much. But the weaving set and having that yarn under a slight amount of tension and figuring out the wraps per inch came out about 22 wraps per inch, 22, which meant I could set it at 22 ends per inch, and that felt manageable, that felt doable. So let's pivot for just a second, and I will show you. So this past week, I went to our mailbox. We have community mailboxes here where I live, and there was a box in there. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I didn't order anything. And the kids are like, what's that? What's that? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't order anything, I promise. And Mike and I have been very careful recently about what we're bringing into the home, because we're really trying to clean out for all of these rentals that we're doing. So everything that comes in, we're like, is this like the right thing to come in the house? Like, do we really need this? Does it really need to come in the house? So I haven't bought any more support spindles since I last bought my Mirkwood, my last Mirkwood, which I got on sale. So I looked at the box and I was like, oh, that's weird. It's from Alan Berry. And Alan lives just over the border from me. He's about 30 minutes from my house. I could probably like drive down and actually like have coffee with the guy. Rebecca, we should interview him for the for Wool and Spinning Radio. Anyhow, there was a box from Alan Berry, and I was like, that's really weird. I didn't order anything from him. This is really strange. Well, I opened up the box as soon as I got home, and this is what was inside. So I got very tearful, and the kids were like, are you crying for good reasons or are you crying for bad reasons? I was like, I'm crying for the best reasons possible. And he matched it. Whomever ordered this and whomever asked for this, got this for me. He copied what is on my spindle. So somebody obviously sent him my, like they knew, they copied my profile, like they made sure that they knew my profile, like that he knew which, you know what I mean? Like they coordinated, there was planning involved. And then there's the copper spinning bowl. And on the back it says AB Woolen Spinning. So, thank you. It is a beautiful gift. Thank you so much. And that's very, very kind. I don't think it was him because somebody asked Rebecca for my mailing address. So I know that it was someone from within our community. All right, so let's talk more about this project because I started to talk about it last week with you guys. So what I did was I took the warp. I first had to figure out all of my yardage from all of that Cormo, and I decided to naturally dye the warp. And so I wound the warp. It's 22 ends per inch. We have talked a little bit on the show about documentation. I still don't really know what the best way is for me. I'm not sure what, you know, yeah, I'm still really torn about what is going to work for keeping my projects organized, keeping things straightforward. Everybody's saying about Alan, wow, that's amazing. So gorgeous. It's beautiful. What a wonderful gift. Awesome craftsmanship. I totally agree. Everybody, totally. And so what I did was for this M's and W's scarf stole, I decided to wind the warp and see if I could dye it. I talked to Dorothy briefly a little while ago about it. She had tried to space dye a warp and like do a resist dyed warp, and with I think she had mentioned to me that like her results, she wasn't super happy with her results, and I thought, you know, if it ends up being very similar all the way across and it ends up kind of just being like a kettle dye, I'm okay with that. This is the first time dyeing a warp by myself, and I thought, you know, I'm just gonna let this unfold and happen as it is, and I could chain it really super tightly and try to do sort of a resist idea. Maybe I should have tried to, I don't know. I'm actually really happy with the fabric. I'll share it with you in a few minutes. So in this little weaving book here, I've got sort of some of my current projects. My other weaving book that I've showed in the past, I keep all of the specifications on there. So all of the numbers that I'm pulling off the loom in real time. And then in here, I've kind of turned it into my project organization book. So unfortunately you can't really see my pencil marks there, but this is like all of my project planning, all of the math that goes into it, a little sample of the yarn, the pattern that I've made. So this is M's and W's up here. This is the threading. It's just an extended twill where you're going up and then down a bit and then up and then back down all the way. So for those who are familiar with twills and know what extended twills look like, this is an extended twill. And then this is trompe as rit. So this means that the threading in your loom is the same as your treadling. And this was my tie up here. So that is the way that it's tied up in twill. So 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 1. And then my treadling, like I said, and then I just threw in Fiberworks a couple of other treadlings just to remind myself, okay, what does M's and W's look like? So this is straight draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see how it creates that M's and W's look. So you've got your W right here, and you've got your M up here. And then over here, I had just a point twill. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the reason why I did that was because I thought, well, if I've got some extra warp at the end, I'm going to do some playing and just see what these other patterns look like. And then I have all of my die specifications of what I actually did to the warp itself. So I don't know if this is the way that I'm going to continue to document my stuff. This was my Christmas Crackle tea towels that I did recently on Welford Weaves. If you're interested in that, they're in commercial cotton, so I haven't shared those on the podcast. But this was the pattern that I came up with, the profile draft, and then all of the stuff over here, how much it cost. I do keep track of the cost. And so that's sort of the project, and I organized it that way and sort of set myself up. And then let me just move over here. I dyed the warp with marigold. I have marigold natural dye stuffs from Miwa. Miwa, everybody says it a little bit differently. And I made a slurry separately in a separate pot, and I sort of followed the directions, if you will, for making your marigold dye. I'm talking too fast, so I'm getting ahead of myself. I put it through a sieve after it had simmered on the stove for a certain amount of time to get all of the little particles and all the little bits of marigold out. And then I created I had scoured the warp. I did that very gently. And then I mordanted with alum. And then I created the kettle dye for the marigold. And as you can see here in this photo, basically the warp came out very uniform. There are places where it's a little bit darker. As I was winding it on, I was like, oh, there's a bit of a darker spot, and oh, there's a bit of a lighter spot. But I think overall the feeling will be very monotone. It'll be very, very similar. And there won't be much difference across the warp. So what I was really excited to share with you was the sampling. So this is really cool. So here is, I know it's hard to see. I might have to see if I can scroll, go in for you. I tried to upload some photos of this for you guys so that you could see some close-ups, but like I said, I was having some issues with upload before the show, and I just could not get the photos to upload, so that was really frustrating. This line that you see here in the middle of the cloth, that's plain weave. I did 4 picks of plain weave and I did some plain weave here as well. So you'll see how there's kind of this difference here. But the reason for that was this was my initial sampling. So I put this on my 16 shaft Ashford table loom. It's a 22-inch wide loom. Oh, people have questions. Oh, Christine says I'm using non-digital means to record projects as well. A notebook and a photograph album with record cards. Very cool. And then she's also using Ravelry's notebook. I still use Ravelry's notebook. As much as I have issues with Ravelry and with some of the media and the response to some of the things that have happened over the last few years, the notebook part of Ravelry, I still use. I haven't found a substitute for that that has been like good enough to change my flow, or my what's that called when you've got like the way you do things. There's a word for it. Yeah, it's kind of still part of my workflow. So I put this on the 16 shaft table loom. This is the first warp to ever go on that loom, which is really exciting. I have to order more heddles. I was talking in weaving group on Friday that I have to get more heddles for it. It came with, oh, now I'm going to forget, it came with 40 heddles per shaft. So 40 times 16. And it's not enough. I need about double that. So I'm going to have to put it in an order. So this was my very first weaving on the loom, never having woven on the loom before, just kind of getting a feel for it. And you can see how gauzy this is and how loose and open it is. It's just not, you can't see the M's and W's pattern at all. I just wasn't beating hard enough. And I was sort of like, what is 22 ends per inch? Like how, much is this, gonna be able, like, should I pack it down more? Do I need to? So this is just getting used to it and just sort of, organizing, like, okay, it's in the end, I should put a little caveat thing in here. In the end, it is actually set at 21 ends per inch. So in the end, on the loom, with the reed, the way that I had to do the reed substitution and stuff, because I didn't have quite the right reed, it's actually set at 21 ends per inch. So it's a little bit like one end looser than what my original plan was. So my plan was that I was going to sample at sort of, 18, 19 ends per inch, as well as 20, 23 ends per inch. What ended up happening was I went right smack in the middle, and I don't think I need to do further sampling. This is perfect. Not this, but what we'll talk about in a minute. So very loose. Part of the reason for beating so loosely at the beginning, and you can see I kind of packed it down a little bit in here and then I went loose again. I was really concerned about breaking the warp threads. Like, I'd gotten them onto the loom with no breakage. This spindle spun yarn it's elastic and it's stretchy. It's not heavily twisted. I'm just like, I don't know what's going to happen. Is it all going to fall apart? Maybe. But after this initial sort of 4 inches of sampling, I was like, you know what? This is okay. Like, the selvages are okay. Everything's kind of okay. So I took some measurements and I was weaving at like 16, 14 ends per inch. So I was like, okay, all right, Rachel, enough is enough. No more tiptoeing around. You got to like weave this thing. So, and you can't get like a really hard beat on a table loom anyways. Like, we're not talking about like a big floor loom. I'm on my table loom. So I think Kelly asked which loom it's on. It's on the Ashford 16 shaft table loom. So I went a little bit harder, beat a little bit harder. This still wasn't firm enough. And so I did some picks of plain weave and I did it again. And again, I wasn't getting hard enough. So finally I was like, okay, I have to actually pull it and hold the beater, change the shaft, and then push it back, because it would come in and it's placing it. You're not beating it like you do cotton, you're placing it because it's wool. So you're pulling it into where you want it, so you beat, change to your next shaft, and then let the beater go back. So it's a little bit cumbersome because you've got all these things happening, and on a table loom it's a little bit slower. But by this point on here, I was getting a 50-50 balanced weave. So 21 ends per inch, 21 picks per inch, and that started to look a lot nicer. And you can actually see the M's and W's patterning because I was weaving Trompus Rit. You can see it coming through now. I was really concerned with what was going on over here, and I thought for sure I had a threading error. I went through it. I went through every single end, every single warp thread. It's all correct. And what it was just a certain part of the warp. Like, I think what happened was the warp threads in here were a little bit finer and a little bit thinner, and it just got a little bit weft faced, and it just doesn't look quite right. But in here, it actually like fixed itself. So this is the finished sample. This is my 50-50 balanced weave, and it's really too bad because on the camera you guys can't see it, but in real life you can see the pattern. You can see the M's and W's. This has been washed and slightly fulled. This has not. So this is unfinished, and this is how the fabric changed. So this is a little bit fuzzier. It's a little bit more indescript in terms of the different patterning. In real life, you can see the patterning like you can here, but on the camera just can't pick it up. It can't pick up all of that detail, which is really too bad because it's actually really, really pretty. So what I did to finish it, because I wasn't totally sure, I knew that the Cormo would full like that, and I knew it would felt like that. So I was very, very careful. I put it into quite warm water with a little bit of eucalyptus, and I swished it around, and then I pulled it out right away. So I wasn't really super aggressive. I didn't thwack it or snap it or like ball it up and throw it in. I didn't do any of that, and it's still nicely fulled. It's a lovely fabric. It's got a lovely drape. This is just so cozy. There's a part of me, I don't want to respin all of this or get more and respin it. I think I'll save this idea for a future project. But what I would really like to do based on this fabric that I've gotten, it is so lovely. It would be perfect for a sweatshirt. So if you spun this light, airy, slightly elastic yarn, maybe not as elastic as this is, but like a slightly elastic yarn, something that could withstand some abrasion or some wear and tear under the arms, and could sort of withstand wear and tear. So you'd need something a little bit more of like a medium wool rather than an ultra fine wool. This will be great for a stole or for a scarf because there won't be all that abrasion happening. It'll go on after all of your clothing, and you're not going to have the wear and tear of something like a sweater or a sweatshirt. However, this, like something like this, you know, M's and W's, or you could do a herringbone, or you could do broken twill. I mean, your imagination is the limit. Weave up some fabric, but then sew a garment. And I think, like, you know, fold, you wouldn't have unraveling when you're making the garment. It would make something really light and airy. This screams something next to the skin for me. Like, this would just be, yeah, incredible. So very happy with my initial sampling. I have it, I cut these off obviously because I wanted to see where I was at, see if I needed to make any changes. And so far the hand spun, touch wood and blue, has been able to withstand the loom no problem. I had no broken warp threads when I was winding on. And it was, after dyeing, I will say, after dyeing, it was slightly fulled together. The individual strands were sticking together a little bit. But putting it through the rattle and winding it onto the back broke everything, and going through the lease sticks broke everything apart. And I was just super gentle. I didn't refine anything. I didn't try to wind on really super fast. If I had to go back, I brought it off the back beam gently and brought it back forward. Mike helped me a little bit. I had to do most of it by myself because I was just really concerned about broken warp threads. But I would bring it back off the warp beam, gently wind it back on, but having it go through the lease sticks, go through the rattle, it pulled everything, anything that was kind of stuck together, it pulled it apart. And now I'm getting nice clean sheds, nothing's stuck together, nothing's fulled, nothing broke, thankfully, in the warping process. You guys would have heard all about that. And so far the yarn has withstood everything that I've put it through thus far. And I am going to leave the weft white undyed. And obviously you guys know me, these are totally my colors. Love these colors. And I do love white on white. I almost did white on white, but in the end, I want to start getting into dyeing a little bit more and getting a little bit more confidence with the dye pots. I have an induction plate. I have this set up. I just need to do it and use it and get a bit more comfortable. So that's something that I'm kind of working on this year, is just stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit and just pushing myself a little bit. So that is that project. I'd love a down fleece, says Dion. I could stand some more down wool experience. It's funny because the downs came up in the Slack channel just the other day. Somebody was asking about what would work in terms of what might work for a project that we were talking about. Rebecca had mentioned, let me go back a sec. Rebecca had mentioned that a sweater that she's has been wearing a lot and worked on and spun and whatnot is felting slightly in high wear areas. And so we were talking about some of the different fibers out there and some of the different wools and stuff where maybe that would be prevented a little bit. And the downs came up because I feel like The downs often are kind of relegated to socks a little bit. And I know Beth Smith used to talk about this a lot, and they don't need to be. Like, we can do lots of stuff with the downs. Look at my metamorphic that I knit out of the South Down. It was amazing. It's an amazing sweater. So we're in the same boat, Charlotte. She says our local Suffolk isn't very clean. It's the same here because they're 100% meat sheep. So that's really frustrating. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Rebecca. I didn't want to, like, you know, put you on the spot. She says it's okay. You can say armpits. It felt it a lot in the armpits. It just means you're warm. I mean, really, that's, yeah, it's not a bad thing. Amanda said, so it was jumping back out a bit if you didn't change the shed with it in place. I wonder if it is related to the elasticity of the yarn. So going back a minute, with the wool, I had to, like I was saying, for those who are sort of new to weaving or just kind of dipping your toes a little bit in some of the weaving stuff, with cotton, you'll often see weavers, like they beat really hard and they'll like bang, bang, or they'll, you know, beat hard and then beat and change, and they'll change their shed. So you have to lift a different combination of shafts to get your next sort of, then it's, I think of it as like the next pattern. It's like, you know, here's like the, you know, it's like knit 2, purl 3, knit 2. It's kind of the same idea. It's like, okay, you know, shaft 1, shaft 2, shaft 3, and then repeat 1, 2, 3. And you have to change your shafts every single time. So what was happening was I had to actually place the wool where it needed to be and then change so that it would hold it in place. And yes, I think you're right, Amanda. I think it's the elasticity. I think it's just very prone to jumping. I don't know how else to describe it. If you guys actually were like at the loom, you would see it. Like, it literally just kind of jumped back. And I think it's just, you know, you're trying to give yourself enough. You don't want to pull your weft tight because then there's other problems. Your sides will draw in a whole bunch and you won't have enough weft yarn to go over and under. Because remember, weaving is quite three-dimensional. So yeah, I had to, but yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's the elasticity. So yes, I love low contrast M's and W's once set and beat are dialed in. I agree, Charlotte. I love all of this really low contrast textured weaving where you have to really look at the fabric and be like, what is that? You can kind of see a little bit better there, the patterning. If you look at it on an angle, you can see it. So the camera's not really focusing on this because it thinks that it wants to focus on the lower bits, but yeah. Super cool. Anyhow, hopefully I'll have a little bit more progress on that in a few weeks and I can share with you guys. They are very bouncy and springy. That's right, Amanda. Okay, let's go on to the next project because otherwise we're going to sit here all day and we won't get anything done, which is not a bad thing, but you know. So I guess I'm going in opposite directions with this because I put number 3 as our M's and W's scarf and I did it as number 1. But the other thing that I wanted to share with you was my fin bats. So I shared this last time and I had a whole video, so please go back and have a look at that. Rebecca has very kindly put timestamps back in, so if you're watching this later, you can jump around and see what you want to see and go to the different areas. It's at the very bottom under links talked about in this show. I put the timestamps there. So that is... we've done all the timestamps from September. So thank you to Rebecca for doing that. This is why I needed a person. I needed to not be a one-man show anymore. I needed to bring someone on. So thank you so much to Rebecca for doing that. This is my fiber that Amber gifted me embarrassingly years ago. And I actually threw in the show notes. Let me see if I can find it. I actually looked it up because I was getting really confused about this. I think it's Kainum Harma. I hope I'm saying that at least somewhat correct. She sent me this shearing from 2016. It was 335 grams. So I will weigh the yarn after it's washed and finished to see what I actually end up with. And I shared in last show all of the lock popping that I did, and I filled up my basket here, my bin. It's not a basket. I filled up my bin and I shared that with you guys. And my goal for today's show, I kind of was working in like 2-week stints, was to have what I had lock popped done and carded into bats. So only that little bit of fiber. And then I'll do the next little bit and then the next little bit and so on and so forth. So hopefully in thirds. So the next third and then the final third. So this was my initial sampling with this yarn, this fiber, when I first received it. I did some combed samples, I did some carded samples, I spun off the comb, and they all kind of came out the same. Like it really didn't matter what I did with it, it was basically the same. So it sat. I've never put it away. It's always been in my spinning basket with all of my other projects, but I just never made time for it. And I said this on the last show, my goal this year is to always have one project going from fleece. So this is that project. And then when this is done, then we'll go on to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. So what I did, and I tried to upload the video and it just absolutely wouldn't work, was I did 3 bats. I did one where I only did 1 pass. So after the lock popping, I did 1 pass. And then I did a second bat that was 2 passes through the drum carder. And then I did a third bat, these are them here, where I put 3 passes through the drum carder. The first bat you can see is kind of lumpy and chunky. The second one is somewhere in between, and the third one looked like this. So my 3 pass bats were just incroyable. They were just amazing, and they're beautiful, and they're springy, and they're smooth, and there's very little, any of the VM that was left from lock popping that hadn't caught and fallen out has now fallen out. And there's almost like a natural crimp to the bats that is really, really lovely. They are smooth and nicely blended. They're very gray, which we expect. And so I was sort of, as I was working with these, I don't know if you guys can see like the crimp in there. Can you see that crimp? I don't know if you can see that, but it's got this like natural wave to it that came out in the carding, which is really cool to see. And the lock pop did just such a beautiful job opening up the tips and butts that it just made the carding experience go so much faster, like so much faster. When I'd initially worked with this, before I got my lock pop, I had to put it in for like through 4 or 5 times to get everything really nicely opened up. So, Laura's here. Maybe she can tell us. So it's Kainu Harmas, which means Kainu's gray. So Kainu is a county in Finland, and they call the sheep Kainu gray in English. So it's really interesting, Laura, because in Western English Wikipedia and stuff, it's spelt like 4 different ways. It's really inconsistent, like how everything is spelled. Like even on here, when Amber sent this to me from Finland, she's Finnish, she even put an N at the end, which is really interesting. And instead of an S, she put A. So you can see how like the confusion begins of like what's what. So I looked it up, and basically they're a native Finnish sheep breed, so native to Finland. They begin as black lambs, but as they age, they turn they turn gray. They're a rare breed. I think they're part of the conservation sort of under that umbrella that they're endangered, but they're very rare. And they were originally considered the gray form of Finn. So originally in like North America, we would just refer to this as Finn, and that it was gray Finn instead of white Finn. I don't know how accurate that is. I would love to hear from somebody who's from Finland, like Laura. I would love to hear you jump in. That would be just awesome to get some direction and some help. Laura does say the N in the end of is to say Kainu's, like to plural. Oh, to make it plural. Oh, this is a strange language. Don't worry, English is strange too. We're all Germanic languages, and we all like, yeah, so there's all these weird idiosyncrasies. So the N is to make it plural. I love it. But I will say this is beautifully soft. It is lovely to work with. I did start spinning it yesterday because I felt awful yesterday. It's on my Lendrum. I haven't spun on my Lendrum for so long. It's been so lovely to get back to it. So I so often default to my Mastercraft wheels because they're so portable. And then I was like, well, that's kind of a funny narrative to tell yourself, that your Mastercraft wheels, which are heavier, are more portable when your Lendrum is no bigger, and it's also a castle wheel and it's lighter. So anyways, I started spinning it yesterday. I spun through 2 of the bats that I had made, and it is so lovely soft. And you guys won't be able to see this really super well, but this is my initial little 2-ply sample. And yes, I am planning to weave with this. So Kelly had asked in the chat a little bit ago about Jamie and the Jones, like a sweater like that. Her and I have been drooling over some of the fabric that is hand woven for some of the garments that are available on Jamie and the Jones. And I don't know the website off the top of my head, but just Google Jamie and the Jones hand woven, it'll come up. There's this sweater that's hand woven that her and I have been coveting for a very long time. And the fabric for this, I think, is a wee bit heavier than that fabric. So she had asked, is this fabric similar to that? And I think this is actually a wee bit heavier. I think this would be better for a hand woven, like more of like a cardigan, like something that's going to drape and hang, something like a sweatshirt, but like yeah, I have this vision of a cardigan in my mind. I'll post it on Slack later that I've kind of been wanting to make for a really long time, that's in like a herringbone pattern. Or like a pinwheel, like a 4-shaft pinwheel. But you would need a high contrast, low contrast yarn. So that wouldn't be for this, but you could do herringbone with this, or you could do just a point twill or a rose path. And then you would have fabric to do I'm talking like a cardigan, like with like with pockets. And yeah, I kind of have this vision in my mind. So I will post that on Slack later. So yes, so very happy with how this is turning out. I'm just going to keep on spinning, filling up bobbins, and then I'll wind them to the first spun end. Yes, this is a woolen prep, but I am spinning in quite a worsted way. I am smoothing as I go because of wanting to weave with this. So it's not a super fuzzy yarn. It's quite smooth with a lovely twist angle, quite fine. I don't have a I do have a spinning control card, and I can share with you under tension. This is spinning up to be about 28 ends per inch. So if I were to put this on the loom right now, I would probably set it somewhere between 14 and 15 for plain weave and 16 for twill, 17 maybe for twill. So that is that project. I'm watching the time we are getting on as usual. Yeah. Or Kai-News. Sorry for mixing things. That's okay, Laura. I'm really curious. So it's to make it from Kai-Nu or Kai-News. Oh my goodness. It's possessive, not plural. Thank you. That's very helpful. It's the possessive adding the N, not the plural. Okay. That's very helpful. I tend to smooth my fine wools to make them a little bit sturdier. I do the same thing, Dion. I do tend to, when I'm doing continuous back, I do tend to smooth as I go. Yeah, so. This yarn is not super bouncy and springy. You can see here, it's not super high twist. I did not put a ton of twist in it, but it is certainly acting more like how I would describe a medium to coarser wool, where there's just not a lot of bounce to it. It has a lovely curling crimp, like I showed you in the bats. I know it didn't come up super, super well. Again, if it was 4K, it probably would, but there's not a lot of elasticity here. It's a little bit, but not a ton. And the more I smooth it and kind of like rub my fingers on it, the more it roughs up. It is still very soft and very fine. So this will really make a beautiful woven fabric. So I will keep you posted on that. Yes. All right. Let's go to community participation, because otherwise the show is just going to get so long. So I'll see you guys on the other side. Okay, so we had this really fun thing happen in the community over the last week or so, a couple weeks. I think Eve hit her limit or something on beautiful yarn, and she's like, okay, beautiful yarn is beautiful, but what about your first hand spun yarn? Let's go back to the beginning. There's lots of people here who are just learning how to spin. Show us your first yarns. So and other people started jumping on board and sharing. So it was really, really fun. So thank you to Brittany and Eve for kind of jump starting that conversation. And what ended up happening was a bit of a snowball effect of everybody sharing their first hand spun yarn. So this one is from Eve. We see so many pretty yarns on here. How about seeing our first yarns? Here are my earliest yarns spun on a drop spindle, park and draft. This is really important because we look at these yarns and when we're first learning how to spin, we're so overly critical. And now coming back years later, it's like, it wasn't that bad. This is from Brittany. She's the one that actually started this, and this was in response. Eve responded to Brittany. I'm still super new to spinning and a bit embarrassed of where I compared to all the beautiful spins I've seen, but I wanted to share my very first spin, which is the maroon, versus my newest spin, which is the 5th time. Still have a good ways to go for consistency and such, but glad I'm progressing some. Next week, I get to learn how to ply my singles together. I think she's taking a class. And the first spoon I tried to ply because my excitement overtook versus actually trying to learn more about it. I thought I was good to go in with just a 5-minute video. See? Plying is a whole other thing. You didn't do a bad job, Brittany, but I hear you in terms of like learning a bit more. Dion says my first yarn was that bad. This is from Courtney. My first yarn was a 3-ply of all of my practice singles. Everything from fingering to super bulky in one skein. I love that idea. I think that's wonderful. My first intentional spin was a 2-ply, which was the purple, and both were spun on drop spindles. It's great. Those first yarns do not look like first yarns, Courtney. They're absolutely beautiful. And this is why it's so much fun to share. Alberto says, oh wow, that's awesome. My first hand spun was in the 80s when most yarn instruction led to underplied yarns. 20 years later, I learned I could reply my yarns to add twist and improve them. Yes, because back then it was like it has to be balanced right off the wheel. We didn't know what we didn't know because we were relearning a craft and a skill set that had sort of mostly been lost, right? So you can see why some of this stuff happened. This is from Ellen. I love this. I don't remember my very first yarn. It was 20 years ago. However, one of the first yarns I just made a hat out of. I had 2 skeins. One was way thinner than the other. See how it doesn't matter? Knitting is so forgiving. Amanda posted about this on the Slack channel just this past week about how forgiving knitting is. And I have a project to share with you guys next time. My pressed flowers is at a really awkward stage, but I'll talk about it next time in terms of how truly forgiving knitting is to our hand spun yarns. Beautiful, Ellen. This is from Rebecca. My first yarns are still hanging among other skeins over my bedroom door. It's those 2 things hanging long, 2 tiny skeins tied together, and the one to the right of it. I got Wensleydale because it was pretty and found it impossible to draft. I got more Wensleydale in a similar colorway years later, and I imagine weaving with it one day. Yeah, it was Brittany that started it. Yeah. Martha says, sadly, I don't remember my first hand spun. It's funny, I remember mine. It was Shetland, and I was spinning on a Lundrum DT with my friend Chrissy at her then apartment in Marpole in South Vancouver. And I remember seeing her spinning going, holy smokes, I can't believe I'm doing this. And that kind of messed me up because I kind of lost my rhythm. And I didn't keep it. I did keep it for years, but then I just got lost in the shuffle. Joni shares my first and second yarn spun about a year ago. Beautiful, Joni. Amazing. I love that blue one. That color is just gorgeous. And I like how the white one, because it is thick and thin, because it's your first yarn, it's spiral plied. People intentionally make this yarn. It's perfect. That's why we can't be too hypercritical. Eve said she just ran with it with getting this discussion going, but I think it was a little bit of cheekiness on her part, and it worked out. It was just perfect. This is why we need people like you, Eve. You see things from a different perspective. It's brilliant. This is from Sarah. Welcome back to Sarah. She's been doing other things, and now she's come back into the community again, which is wonderful. She's just down in Washington, really close to me. My first yarn and pretty close to my first knitting. And I love the photo of her dog. So cute. This is from Charlotte. I thought this was beautiful. First yarn made on one drop spindle session taught by Susan Fricks. And I learned to spin ply from a center pull ball and skein up my tiny skein. I was so bad at the nitty naughty that it was very embarrassing, but Susan was good about showing me, then leaving me alone to figure it out. I kept it as a little souvenir. It's amazing. First ever spinning on a Kundert spindle, November 2015. It's amazing, Charlotte. And her yarns are incredible. Oh, Eve, she's so funny. Me, cheeky, I resemble that remark. Don't you mean resent? This is from Lauren. First hand spun, super chunky, made a tea cozy that I still use today. That is a testimony to how useful our yarns can be. It doesn't matter if they're a little bit chunky and maybe not the prettiest. Look at this gorgeous tea cozy. It's perfect, Lauren. Love it. So let's share some general makes and shares. That this is the stuff that people are working on in our community. Some stuff is finished. This is from Rebecca. So this is actually part of our sock color study that happened last year. Rebecca was kind of spearheading it for the year. And then on top of that was our our breeding color study on Radnor. So these are like all of the socks that she did for those two studies. So I was going to put this separately so that you guys could see it as like breeding color study and the sock color study. But then I thought, you know what? Let's just put it under general and you guys will get it. You guys are smart people. So Rebecca shares, I have 5 pairs of socks finished. Here are all of my breeding color study socks together. I'm in love with how different they all are. Thanks so much to Rachel and Katrina for organizing this study. It was an amazing ride. And I wanted to share with you a second part to this because she actually shares like the individual socks that she added. So these are all 5 pairs, and she talked about her Susarian socks, which are right smack in the middle in that bottom photo there on your left hand side. And then she also had talked about the other ones that were the fractal, but these ones she hadn't shared. I haven't shared with you guys on the podcast. So these were the remaining 2 pairs that were still 3 pairs that were needing to be shared. So a couple of close-ups of some of the pairs that I hadn't shown on the podcast yet, with some of Rebecca's reflections. And there's more in the Ravelry group, and there's more, I think it's under Breeding Color Study on the Slack channel, but for sure it's on her blog, Osborne Fiber Arts. Osborne Fiber Arts, is that right, Rebecca? Link to your blog in the chat. That would be awesome. So the red-orange socks are super interesting because you see the effect of the red colorway having less breadth in value and hue than the blue-green colorway. This makes the stripe changes less jarring in the chain plied sock at the heel turn and where I started a new strip of fiber. In the fractal sock, it means that the color in the largest strip of fiber dominates, while the narrower strips are just a subtle hazy change in the overall red, except for at the cuff and the toe where the light color was in more than one ply, more than one single. So, yeah. You guys can rewind and re-listen to that if you can't read it, but it's really interesting because the fact that the red-orange socks, the coral socks, have less breadth and value and hue, so they're more similar. It's one color family versus several in the blue-green ones, which are at the very end there. The light and dark areas are less jarring. There's more of a fluid shift between all of those different areas. And in the fractal one, it's pretty much lost completely, except for in the toe where she had at least 2 singles of the lighter color, which is really interesting. Whereas if you look at the very far side where the green ones are, because there was more difference in the hue and in the value, so there was green, blue, turquoise, navy blue, there was a lot more color in those. Even though they were still analogous, there was no red. There's also a difference in value. So the light and dark was more significant. So if you look at that dark blue area versus the lighter seafoamy kind of green area, that's a big difference. And so that showed up more in the fractal. So if you're looking at a braid of fiber and there's some really, really, really dark spots and there's some really, really, really light spots, the finished skein and the finished fabric, if you spun it in any of these ways, fractal, chain ply, 3-ply, whatever, are going to have more breadth, more interest. because there's going to be a wider spectrum of difference in value, and also, and depending on the colors, maybe in the colors. Does that make sense? You can see the differences between how the red and blue colorways acted. The blue chain ply has more jarring stripes, and the blue fractal is more defined to my perception by the middle size stripe. In other words, the fractal stripes more. Yeah, exactly. Whereas the red-orange one looks a little bit more analogous, like it's a little bit more uniformed across the whole thing. I actually like the combo plied socks better, so they're the ones that are closest to me on the screen here. I find those stripes just mesmerizing. The combo drafted sock is a great example of simultaneous contrast. We will get into that in coming months in spinning pearls, because the red dots that stand out really shift the bright blue bits toward green. Exactly. Overall, the whole thing looks Christmassy to me. For those who have not studied the color contrasts, we are going to be starting to study those in spinning pearls beginning in March. So we will be introducing the color contrasts. What are they? There are 7, and we will be exploring each of them in our hand spun starting in March. And that will take us through into, I think it's the late spring. We'll do 2 per month, and then we'll go from there. So thank you, Rebecca, for all just the breadth of sharing. It's just awesome. All right. Sam shares, I love these. These are so much fun. When we had the group yesterday, so she talked about weaving group, I was starting an emergency cast on as I was low on mitts, as some were damp from walking Nick in the rain. So here is my right hand done, quite literally hot off the needles. I am in love. The fiber is Huckleberry Targhee and silk, which was gifted to me by Eve, and I actually spun the berry colorway when I was at her house just as a spin with no target, just for fun. It's beautiful, Sam. The green I did last year. I had planned to make these to take to New York City, but ran out of time. The pattern is the winter edition, winter 2021 edition of Ply Magazine by Tanis Gray. Yeah, I hear you, Dion. She says, I love the look of combo drafting, but I don't enjoy holding the colors next to each other. I agree. It is finicky. It's fiddly. Cindy shares, recently finished my Kingdom Fleece and Fiberworks Advent Spin. Really happy with how everything turned out. I chose to ply together each A and B for the week together. I wasn't sure how week 3 would turn out, but love it together. And I'm also pleased with how consistent the spinning was for each fiber. And I came up with about 350 to 375 yards for each skein in a heavy fingering weight sport weight yarn. Amazing. I love these. They are beautiful, Cindy. I particularly like that purpley gray one. That is just right up my alley for color. It's just beautiful. Alex shares, I think I have finally managed to spin sock weight 3-ply. I was playing with the new electric e-wheel Nano, so I had to go with some fiber stash. It's a 2-ply spun Z and 1 spun S, and then plied S. So it's an opposing 3-ply. I had uptake issues with the Nano when plying, so I plied it on my Lendrum DT at 12:1. I wound up the colors so that they would line up. Beautiful. I love this. I love the colors. They're really fun. Kind of some pops of color in this wintry gray that we're experiencing here. And this is from Lisa. This is so much fun. I finished something. This is a rug for my bedroom, for my bedside. Alpaca core spun weft and a 3-ply Romney weft, and then a woven on my Macomber. It does lie flat, but every time I tried to take a picture, the little jerk on the top left was too busy playing on it. But he's so cute. And what an amazing rug. Pretty cool, hey you guys. This is from Sue. I'm getting braver. I'm down to fingering weight wool yarn now, commercial sock yarn in the warp, and so far my own hand spun in the weft. Isn't that incredible? And it looks great what you're weaving there, Sue. Just beautiful. That's a great idea for combo drafting. You can diz them together, diz them off your combs together, or diz them off of the drum carder together. Oh, Sorry guys. This is from Laura. This is incredible. I shared these yarns with you guys way back when she first finished them, and she had these plans for the juxtaposition. I know that I shared this and talked about this then, and she's actually finished it now, which is so cool to be able to do the follow-up. So well done, Laura. I started my juxtaposition sweater on Saturday and I'm completely addicted to it. All the other projects just have to wait. All the yarn is hand spun, also the colors are mixed by me on the drum carder or the blending board. That was the purple blues. And it's finished, all hand spun. All of the colors except the white and the darkest gray are mixed on the blending board of the or the drum carder by me. I'm so happy with the full final project. And Laura, like you can tell by your face, you look so happy. It looks incredible on you. And what a perfect fit. Oh my goodness, it's perfect on you. It's just great. So well done. Love this sweater, says Christine. Yes. And this is from Amanda. I finished up, I only popped, she's got a couple of things that she's finished up for our breeding color study just recently. So I thought, well, I'll do one this week and then I'll share with you guys another one next week or next time, because it gets too long, and it's nice to be able to showcase a yarn, especially when it's a beautiful photo and you guys do such beautiful work, and oh, it's just so great to be able to share all your stuff. I finished up spinning the blue braid of Hill Radnor as an opposing 3-ply. I did not leave my opposing single to rest, and that was a mistake as I was fighting it the whole time. I also probably could have done with less initial twist in it to begin with. The skein itself came out as balanced, but I had so much trouble getting the tension on each single to match as I was plying. So it is starting to lean toward a spiral ply yarn in places. I have had that happen. It's frustrating. But it's a beautiful yarn regardless, and this is the blue-green colorway from last year's Radnor study. So we had the 4 fiber preps from Katrina. We had 2 bats, 1 red-orange and 1 blue-green. And then we had 2 braids, 1 blue-green and 1 red-orange. So this is the first of, I suspect, what's going to end up being 4 yarns, correct, Amanda? She's shared 3 so far, and I'll share the other 2 with you guys next time. Thanks, you guys. Thank you for being you. Thank you for sharing everything that you do. Thank you for being here and for being a part of the community, for keeping it going, and for all of the things that you contribute on the Slack channel, on the Ravelry group, and of course here at the live stream every time that we stream. So we actually, January is a weird month because it's 5 Tuesdays. So we actually have a 2-week break. And then we're back the first Tuesday of February at same time, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And so what I thought I would do, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, but just in case you didn't catch it, next Tuesday, there will be a premiere at 10 a.m. Pacific for everyone. But instead of doing a Welford Weaves premiere, it will be a premiere of Spinning Pearls, which is the teaching content for the Patreon community. The Spinning Pearls this month got so long, like I mentioned, that I divided it into 2 parts, and this is the second part of a 2-part series. So I'm excited to share that with you guys this time next week. And until then, happy spinning. I hope you're carving out some time to make and to craft and to engage in all of the creativity that you are able to. And if you want to talk about it and you want to talk about what you're making, we are here. So please join us. Thank you so much. Charlotte says, thank you everyone for the lovely inspiration, and thank you to myself for the show. You're so welcome. I love doing this. So thank you for being here, everyone. And I will see you next week. We also have a Maker Morning. It is coming up this week on Thursday. I double checked before the show. It is Thursday this week. I'm sorry for the confusion last time. So our Maker Morning is this week on Thursday morning at 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern. And if you're a patron of the community, you are welcome and to attend. So I hope to see you guys then. And otherwise, I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye, everyone.